Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. In this one I'm going to be doing some more work on the Kawasaki 1100 triple that will be swapped into the X2. Quite a few videos back I made a tool for my lathe and bored out the cylinders, and the story kind of ended there. In this day and age there are plenty of horror stories out there about people getting taken advantage of by big companies and corporations, and I don't think that there's nearly enough stories about those who do good. Corporations and companies who do the right thing should be shouted out so that there's more incentive for them to do so. Hopefully this video is going to be about that, so let's get into the story by jumping back a little bit in time. Up till a few months ago I had done all of my honing with a spring-loaded hone like most people do, but with the 1100 there were 3 cylinders and I had planned to leave a lot of material behind so that if there was chatter marks from the boring job, I would be able to take care of them. So because of that, I splurged a little and I bought myself a Lisle Hone that looks a little bit like this. This is a Lisle rigid hone, and I will get into how this works later on in the video, but this is a very handy tool. So I got this tool, I started using it, and immediately I noticed that there was a problem with the racks. So the racks are the pieces that move in and out with wipers and stones on them. Unlike a spring-loaded hone, this thing is adjusted rigidly. That's why they call it a rigid hone. And so the fact that the racks weren't made properly was causing the hone to kind of oscillate around in the cylinder. It made it really hard to work with, and it made the stones and wipers wear unevenly. So you might think that's a bit of a disaster story, but I would disagree with you, and this is the reason why. I contacted the seller, who still has not gotten back to me months later, but I contacted the actual company, the Lisle company, and they responded within 24 hours. The guy who responded was, I forget his exact title, but some sort of engineer himself, and he not only told me how I could temporarily take care of the problem, but he immediately asked me for my address and told me that he would send me out a free rack so that I could take care of this problem for good. A few weeks later, I had the new racks, and now in this video, we are about to test them out. This is in no way a paid promotion. I'm not sponsored by Lisle. They have not asked me to do this. They don't know that I'm doing this, but this is the kit that I bought. The 15,000 kit, which comes with 2 different grits of stones. I believe it comes with an 80 grit for the initial honing, and then the final honing, I think they send you a set of 280 stones. So again, huge shout out to Lisle for just taking action, not messing around, and doing what had to be done to take care of the problem. I believe what makes a good company isn't solely the product that they sell, but how they treat their customers and how their customer service works. No matter how good your product is, you're guaranteed there's going to be some sort of failure for some reason or some sort of issue that your customer is going to have. And when that issue happens, how you take care of your customers is as important as how good your product actually is. So a huge shout out to Lisle, regardless of whether or not this works. Huge shout out to them for doing the right thing and sending the part out right away and trying to take care of this problem. Now, let's get into actually honing out this cylinder, and I will show you guys how to set up the tool and how it works. Here we have a typical spring-loaded hone, and it works really well for what it's intended for, but if you want to remove any amount of material, this is definitely not the tool that you want to use. The way that this works is the arms are spring-loaded, so as you move in the arms, it compresses a spring back here. The only real adjustment that you have is there is a nut that pushes against the spring, and you can increase spring pressure. The spring-loaded hones work really well for deglazing cylinders or for removing light scuff marks, but for removing a substantial amount of material, you want to use either a rigid hone or have your cylinders bored out and then honed. One of the reasons why so many people use spring-loaded hones is because they're very cheap, and also because they're spring-loaded, they conform to the shape of the cylinder and they give you a very pretty look inside of the cylinder, but that's not necessarily always a good thing. The inside of the bore has to be very precise in order for the piston to fit properly and to trap the gases and also transfer the heat from the piston to the cylinder wall. One of the biggest advantages of a spring-loaded hone is also one of its disadvantages, and that is the fact that a spring-loaded hone will conform to the shape and hardness of the inside of a cylinder. One of the most common things that you will do as an engine builder is take care of scuffing marks on the inside of a cylinder, and a lot of the time that includes a little bit of aluminum that was left behind from a piston. This can be an issue because if you use a spring-loaded hone to remove that aluminum, you're also removing material from the rest of the cylinder, which can leave you with an out-of-round or oval bore. That can cause cooling issues, blow-by, or lack of compression. I mentioned hardness of the inside of the cylinder, or the hone conforming to the hardness, and that can happen in a couple of ways. One way can be two-stroke ports. The area where there are ports, there's less material, and so it's going to cut deeper in those areas. And the other way that it can happen is if you have metal against metal inside of the cylinder that can actually basically heat treat the inside of the cylinder in a very small area and cause a hard spot. So if you have a piston ring issue where a piston ring gets jammed up and stuck, it can push into the cylinder wall and cause a really hard spot on the cylinder wall, which then that material won't get removed as quickly, so the rest of the cylinder will get bored out more than the area that is hard. Does that make sense? One of the advantages of a rigid hone is the fact that it is rigid. The clue is in the name there. And the way that it basically works is the hones get turned out to a certain position and it gets locked in place, and then you do your boring. Mine has a micrometer adjustment, so you actually know how much you're turning out the stones. This is a huge advantage because the stones or the cutting action isn't just conforming to the shape of the cylinder. You can actually take a cylinder that is slightly out of round, slightly oval, or has kind of weird damage to it, and you can actually make it round again using one of these. This is meant to be a guide and shouldn't be used to do kind of like final bores. So if you want to take off exactly 30 thousandths, you shouldn't put this in and then, work your way up 30 thousandths. You want to check along the way because, yeah, if you just depend on this, you're probably going to get yourself in trouble. Anyway, what you do, you put the tool into the bore like so. You turn the large knob counterclockwise until you engage the stones. You slide it to lock the pins in place, and then you use your micrometer adjustment until these stones have a little bit of pressure against the cylinder walls. Once you have the micrometer adjusted so there is a light pressure on the stones, you then hook up your drill, do a bit of honing, and continue to turn in on the micrometer until you remove the amount of material that you want. Along the way, you need to be pulling this tool out, putting your piston in and checking it so that you don't bore it out too big. This tool is intended to be used with a 1/2-inch drill, and it comes with a nice hex end on the shaft. I turned mine down on a lathe because I don't have a 1/2-inch drill. Keep in mind that this is very hard on a 3/8 drill, and if you don't give the drill time to cool off, you're going to burn it out. A 1/2-inch drill is a much better idea if you have one, and if you have a 3/8 drill, you better be willing to take your time and let it cool off. Otherwise, you're going to be buying a new drill. I know what you guys are thinking. Is this guy ever going to stop telling stories and actually do some work? Well, I have one more story to tell you guys, and it's kind of an important one. It's made my life a whole lot easier when it comes to honing. When I first started honing many years ago, I did it in a Verisol parts washer at a shop, and what you would do is just run the Verisol into the cylinder and it washes away all the crud. It keeps it cool and lubricated, and it works quite well. I then started doing stuff at home, and I don't have a parts washer, so I would use WD-40. It makes a huge mess, and you keep needing to add more because it builds up all the gunk. It sticks to the stones, and then you need to add enough WD-40 to actually wash that crud away. It makes a huge stink, it makes a huge mess, and it's just nasty and gross. It wasn't until I purchased this Lisle stone and actually read the manual that I realized that you can do honing dry. Shortly after, like a day or 2 days after, I was actually having a conversation in the comments section with Only Fifth Scale and Jacob from Jet Ski Brothers, and Only Fifth Scale told us that he actually does all of his honing dry and that he's been doing it that way for a long time. And so I decided to give it a try, and wouldn't you know, it's actually the bee's knees. The one downside of it is that it makes a bit of dust, so I do a couple of things to help myself. One is I take magnets and I put magnets all around to try to get the dust, the iron dust out of the air to stick to the magnets. And the other thing is I run a fan in the background to blow the air away from me so that I'm not breathing all that nasty stuff in. But dry honing, definitely the answer if you're doing it at home. Stay away from the WD-40. Don't use any kind of solvent. Don't use oil. I will definitely be doing it this way from now on. It works really well. It's a lot tidier, and I don't really see any good reason for using a lubricant, so I'm not going to do it anymore. I've been honing for about 8 minutes now, and I decided to bring you guys back and show you. I put a few more magnets around, and you can actually see inside of the exhaust port there is a fairly substantial amount of metal that's built up there. I'll just put this in there and gather it up. You can see all of that. And then I also put a magnet here, and I cleaned off all these magnets just out of curiosity to see how much material they would actually gather up. So that's working somewhat anyway. Now that the bore is starting to take shape, I'm going to take my new Wiseco piston out and make sure that this is actually the diameter that I think it is. I'm going to measure it with this and with my good caliper. I actually have two of these. This one I keep for finer stuff. I don't scribe with it. I don't smash it around. And then I have another one that gets really abused. That's the one that you guys see most of the time. And see if this agrees. Showing me 3.226. All right, so I've got about 26 thousandths to take off of the bore. So that is a reasonable number to shoot for. As I said earlier, I think I said earlier, I left about 30 thousandths behind just in case there were chatter marks. It looks as though I did a pretty good job boring because I've only removed about 4 thousandths and it's actually cleaned up really nicely, so I've got it bored out quite a bit. I've got 8 thousandths left to go, and I decided to try something a little different. It's been working a lot better with the new racks that Lisle sent me, but I'm still having a bit of issues with the wipers deteriorating, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the ports are quite sharp and all of the port edges are cutting away at the wipers. So what I've decided to do, I've never actually tried this before, but I'm actually using 2 sets of stones. I've got one of my old sets of stones on the wipers, and they are a very fine stone. And then I've got the new coarse ones that I'm actually doing the cutting with, and it seems to run a lot smoother. Just boring out my cylinders, and I took a little break to pull my drive shaft out and measure it for Zach. Zach is doing a triple swap on an X2. He's putting a 900. I've mentioned him a couple of times. Zach is the person who sent me the reed valves and a bushing for my starter. So thanks for that, Zach, and I hope your shaft works out well for you. All right, YouTube, I finished up doing the honing off camera. I've got this cylinder all honed out. It looks beautiful. I don't know if the camera can really pick up on that, but I've got that all honed out, looking nice, fitting perfectly. I've decided to hone these out so that I have a clearance of 6 thousandths. And the reason why I did that, it recommends in the manual 5 thousandths, and because these are forged pistons and slightly oversized, I didn't want them fitting too tightly. Anyway, this is a 6 thousandths feeler gauge. I don't know if the camera can see that, but it is 0.15 millimeter or 6 thou. And we can slide it in there. It's pretty snug, but it fits in there. And for any of you wondering, this is what the magnets look like now that I've finished doing my honing. You can see they have a very generous coating of stuff all over both sides of them. This is basically material that was honed off of the cylinders. I would really like to start sandblasting stuff next. I have a whole lot of stuff to sandblast. The engine cases, the cylinders, the head, a bunch of parts that I made, including the water box and the expansion chamber, the exhaust outlets. One of the problems is that I still haven't found myself a sandblasting cabinet. I've been searching online every night. I look pretty much and try to find one, and I just haven't found one at the right price. I've been just holding off, and very likely what's going to happen is I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time on my knees, bent over that Rubbermaid cabinet on the floor, Rubbermaid bin rather, on the floor, with a piece of glass over it, and that's where I did all my sandblasting for the 650 last year. And as miserable of a job as that is, it's a lot nicer than doing it with a wire brush or sandpaper or anything else, so I guess I really shouldn't complain. But yeah, at one point I had decided that I was going to build myself a sandblasting cabinet, and even though I am quite capable of doing that, it would probably take me about a week to do it. I would have to source all the materials, I would have to order parts, including the gloves and the lights and all the odds and ends. And at this point in the game, I just don't have time for that. If I was going to invest that kind of time in my shop, I would probably right now do a major organization change and build a bench that had a welding area at it and stuff like that. But anyway, that is a lot of ranting that started talking about sandblasting. I would really, ideally, like to do all of the sandblasting together and then do all of the powder coating together. And then if I could get the engine together enough or far enough in advance, I would really like to pull everything off of the hull. I mean, completely strip the hull, repaint it after doing a bunch of fiberglass work and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of little things left to do. It's not looking really good for that, but again, ideally, that is what I would love to do. I'm not really sure what my next video is going to be about. It might be a little bit of a stretch between now and when I release my next video, because it's probably going to be a lot of odds and ends. I got to do some fiberglass work inside of the hull. I'm going to have to spend a whole bunch of time figuring out some parts. I'm going to have to get a starter relay, some wiring, a battery, and then figure out where I'm going to put the battery. I've got to remove the battery box from inside of the hull that's in there. I got to figure out what I'm going to do for a gas tank, where I'm going to put the gas tank, how I'm going to mount the gas tank, if I'm going to put any actual fiberglass mounts for the water box, and a whole lot of other stuff. So yeah, not sure what the topic of the next video is going to be, but it's almost certainly going to be about the 1100 triple swap. After a whole lot of cutting, grinding, and sanding, I got the battery box completely removed. I'm going to have to put in a support. I'm going to put a piece that goes across here. And I'm also going to extend this piece forward to about here. You can see on this side, there's one of these ribs here. So I'm going to make this one come ahead to about the same point. And I've also kind of cleaned up around this. When I cut it out, I just cut it out with the jigsaw and hacksaw blade. Seems to me all I've done in this video is make a huge mess and not make a whole lot of progress. I guess I did get the cylinders finally honed out, so they're all honed out and ready to go, except that I haven't chamfered the ports yet. I got distracted by the casting marks in the cylinder and decided to do that. And then I moved on to doing some fiberglass work accidentally. So I'm waiting for some wrist pin bearings for the engine. When I get those, I could technically put it together, but I'm going to hold out. I'm hoping to get a sandblaster. It's probably going to take a while to get. So I think what I'm going to start doing is some fiberglass work on the X2. I've got to plug up the exhaust outlet. This outlet has to be plugged up. I think I'm going to relocate the pisser holes. I've got to patch the hole in the front. I've got to put some supports in where the bracing was for the battery. I might relocate the bilge pump hole to somewhere else. It's kind of weird that it dumps right into the footwell. So I might put it so that it comes out the side here or something. And I may as well, while I'm at it, pretty these up. This is the hole for the strap, and I'm thinking about relocating my key switch or my tether switch. Got that there, and I've also been thinking about doing something with this. I really would like to just strip the whole thing down, sand it down, do all the repairs, and paint it. But I don't know that I have the time or money to do that right now. So yeah, depending on how long it takes to get the sandblaster, or if the sandblaster falls through, that will determine what I do next. I've been chatting with Zach in the comments section. He has a X2 that he's doing a 900 triple swap in. He's got some really cool stuff going into it. It's going to be a really awesome build. He test fitted a Superjet fuel tank into his X2 this weekend, and he made me a little video to show me how it fit. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it would fit in my ski because of where the outlet comes out of my pipe. But he also threw in a couple of little things, that he was talking about in the video. And he's going to have a really awesome build. I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this video. That is, if he wants me to. I'm going to check with him, I guess. And go check that out. He's got a really cool build on the go. Once again, I'm not really sure what my next video is going to be. It might be engine building, it might be sandblasting, it might be fiberglass work. I definitely have to do some fiberglass work, so I guess I should just suck it up and do that. But I still have to do some little bits of engine work, so my next video is probably just going to be a jumble of different stuff. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.